The woman stumbling into Red River, New Mexico, that scorching August afternoon in 1876, looked like she had been dragged through hell backwards, and Jared Pierce knew hell when he saw it, because he had visited those dark places more times than he cared to remember during his years in these mountains. He had come down from his cabin in the Sangre de Cristo range for supplies, riding his big bay gelding through the dusty streets with his long, dark hair tied back with a strip of leather, his broad shoulders and muscled arms drawing the usual stares from townspeople who whispered about the mountain man who kept to himself up in the high country. At 32 years old, Jared had built a life of solitude after the war, preferring the company of pine trees and elk to the complications that came with civilization. But when he saw the young woman collapse near the general store, her dress torn and filthy, her face so bruised he could barely make out her features beneath the purple and yellow marks, something inside his chest tightened like a fist. He was off his horse before he consciously decided to move, his boots hitting the dirt hard as he crossed the distance between them. She tried to push herself up, her arms trembling with the effort, and he could see her ribs pressing against the thin fabric of what had once been a blue calico dress. The townspeople just stared, a few women whispering behind their hands, the men looking away as if her suffering was somehow indecent to witness. "Easy now," Jared said, his voice rough from disuse as he knelt beside her. "You are safe." She flinched away from him, and he saw the fear flash in her eyes that were the color of honey when the sun hit them just right. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones too prominent, lips cracked and bleeding from the sun and dehydration. Dark blonde hair hung in matted tangles around her shoulders. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, but she looked ancient in her exhaustion and pain. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice low and steady the way he did when approaching a spooked horse. "Let me help you." "I do not need help," she whispered, but her body betrayed her words as she swayed and would have fallen if he had not caught her. Her skin was burning hot beneath his hands, fever radiating through her thin frame. "You have got a fever," he said. "When did you last eat? Last drink water?" She just stared at him, confusion clouding those honey-colored eyes, and he realized she probably could not remember. He made a decision then, scooping her up into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. She probably did not weigh much more than a child, he thought grimly, feeling every bone in her body through the thin dress. "Put me down," she said, but there was no strength behind the words. "Where are you taking her?" The voice belonged to Marshall Davies, a pot-bellied man with a badge he wore more for show than purpose. "That is one of the Barnett girls. Her pa will not be happy about you handling his property." Jared felt rage spike through him, hot and sudden. "She is not property. She's a human being, and she needs a doctor. Her pa said she ran off, said she is touched in the head and not to be trusted." The marshal shrugged. "Best leave her be. The Barnetts will come collect her." "Over my dead body," Jared said, and there must have been something in his voice or his eyes because the marshal took a step back. Jared had a reputation in these parts, not as a violent man, but as one you did not cross unless you wanted to find out just how much strength those mountains had put into his bones and how much silence had honed his patience down to something sharp and dangerous when pushed. He carried the woman to the doctor's office, shouldering through the door without bothering to knock. Doc Harrison looked up from his desk, his wire-rimmed spectacles sliding down his nose as he took in the sight of the massive mountain man holding a woman who looked half dead. "Christ almighty," the doctor breathed. "Put her on the table." Jared laid her down as gently as he could, but she whimpered anyway, and the sound cut through him like a knife. Doc Harrison began his examination, his weathered hands gentle as he checked her pulse, looked at her pupils, ran his fingers carefully over her ribs. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words Jared could not quite make out. 3 cracked ribs, maybe 4, Doc Harrison said after what felt like an eternity. "Dehydration, malnutrition, fever from infected cuts. This woman has been through an ordeal." "Who did this to her?" "I found her in the street," Jared said. "Marshall said her father's looking for her. Said her name is Barnett." The doctor's face went hard. "Zechariah Barnett. He has a ranch about 15 miles east of here. Mean son of a bitch who thinks his money gives him the right to do as he pleases. Had a wife who died under mysterious circumstances about 5 years back. Has 3 daughters, works them like mules from what I hear." He paused, looking down at the woman on his table. This would be Zara, the middle daughter. She's about 22 if memory serves. Someone beat her half to death, Jared said flatly. Someone has been beating her for years from the looks of these old scars, Doc Harrison corrected. This is just the most recent. Jared's hands clenched into fists at his sides. What can I do? Help me get some water into her for starters. Then we need to clean these wounds before infection kills her. The doctor met Jared's eyes. You planning on staying? Because if her father comes looking, it might get ugly. Let it get ugly, Jared said. I am not leaving her. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, getting water and thin broth down Zara's throat a spoonful at a time, cleaning the cuts and abrasions that covered her body, binding her ribs. Jared held her steady when she thrashed in fever dreams, murmuring words of comfort that felt foreign on his tongue after so many years of silence. Doc Harrison showed him how to bathe her forehead with cool cloths to bring down the fever. It was full dark when Zechariah Barnett kicked open the door to the doctor's office, bringing 2 of his ranch hands with him. He was a big man gone to fat, with cold eyes and a mouth twisted in permanent displeasure. His expensive suit did nothing to hide the cruelty that radiated from him like heat from a stove. I am here for my daughter, he said without preamble. She ran off and needs to come home. Jared stepped between Barnett and the table where Zara lay sleeping fitfully. She is not going anywhere. Who the hell are you? Barnett demanded. Someone who is not going to let you take her. Barnett looked him up and down, taking in Jared's size, the muscles that rippled beneath his shirt, the cold determination in his eyes. She is my daughter, my property. You've got no say in this. She is a human being, and from the looks of what someone did to her, she will die if she goes back with you. Jared's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath the words. She is a lying, thieving little whore who stole money from me and ran off, Barnett spat. I have every right to discipline my own child as I see fit. Discipline? Doc Harrison spoke up from behind Jared. You call breaking her ribs and beating her unconscious discipline? She is 22 years old and weighs maybe 90 pounds because you have been starving her. How I raise my daughters is none of your concern. It became my concern when she nearly died in my street, Jared said. She stays here until she is well. Then she can decide for herself where she goes. Barnett's face turned purple with rage. You have got no authority here, mountain man. Marshal. But Marshal Davies, who had followed Barnett to the doctor's office, just held up his hands. Now, Zechariah, maybe we should let the girl recover before moving her. Doc says she is in bad shape. I pay your salary, Barnett snarled. The town pays my salary, Davies corrected, showing more spine than Jared had given him credit for. And folks in Red River do not take kindly to men who beat women, family or not. It was not entirely true, Jared knew. Plenty of people turned a blind eye to what happened behind closed doors, but Davies was at least making an effort, and that was something. Barnett pointed a thick finger at Jared. You will regret this. I have got friends in this territory, and I will make sure you pay for interfering in my business. I look forward to it, Jared said calmly, and after a long moment of tense silence, Barnett turned on his heel and stormed out, his ranch hands trailing behind him like whipped dogs. Doc Harrison let out a long breath. You just made yourself a powerful enemy. I have had worse, Jared said, though in truth he had spent the last decade specifically avoiding making any enemies at all by keeping to himself. But something about this woman, this Zara with her honey-colored eyes and her broken body, had pulled him out of his carefully constructed solitude, and he found he did not regret it. He stayed through the night, dozing in a chair beside her bed while Doc Harrison went home to his own house. Sometime around 3 a.m, Zara woke screaming, her hands clawing at the air as if fighting off invisible attackers. Jared was beside her in an instant, catching her wrists gently but firmly. You are safe, Fuck, he said. You are at the doctor's office in Red River. No one is going to hurt you. She stared at him wildly, not seeing him, trapped in whatever nightmare had seized her. He did the only thing he could think of, gathering her carefully into his arms and holding her against his chest, one big hand cradling the back of her head, while the other wrapped around her thin shoulders. You are safe, he repeated, over and over like a prayer. I have got you. You are safe. Slowly, gradually, the tension left her body. She sagged against him, and he felt wetness against his shirt where her face pressed against him. She was crying, silent sobs that shook her whole frame. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." "You have got nothing to be sorry for," he told her. "I should not have run. I should have stayed. Now he will be so angry, and my sisters—" Her voice broke. "What will he do to my sisters? How old are your sisters?" "Rose is 24 and Pearl is 19. We were supposed to stay together. We were supposed to protect each other, but I could not take it anymore, and I ran, and now they are alone with him." "Shh," Jared soothed. "We will figure something out, but first you need to get well. You cannot help anyone if you are dead." She pulled back enough to look up at him, and he saw her clearly for the first time, really saw past the bruises and the exhaustion. Even battered and broken, there was a strength in her face, a defiance in the set of her jaw that spoke of years of survival. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not even know me." "Because someone needs to," he said simply, "because what was done to you is wrong, and I cannot stand by and watch it happen." She searched his face as if looking for the lie, the hidden motive, but whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly and let him settle her back against the pillows. He brought her water, held the cup while she drank, and when she finally fell back into an exhausted sleep, he returned to his chair and kept watch. The next days fell into a rhythm. Jared stayed at the doctor's office, sleeping in the chair or sometimes on the floor when his back protested too much. He left only to see to his horse and to buy food that he brought back to tempt Zara's appetite. Doc Harrison taught him how to change her bandages, how to check for signs of infection. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Zara began to heal. She did not talk much those first few days, and when she did, it was usually about her sisters. Jared could see the guilt eating at her, the fear for the young women she had left behind. He wanted to tell her it was not her responsibility, that she had every right to save her own life, but he knew those words would ring hollow. He had his own demons, his own guilt over things he had done and not done during the war, and he understood that some burdens you carried no matter what anyone else said. A week after he had found her, Zara was strong enough to sit up on her own. The bruises on her face had faded from purple to yellow-green, and her ribs hurt less when she breathed. Doc Harrison declared her out of immediate danger, though she still needed rest and food to build back her strength. It was evening, the summer heat finally breaking into something bearable, when Jared sat beside her bed and watched her pick at the stew he had brought from the boarding house. She had managed half the bowl, which was more than she had eaten at one sitting since he found her. "I need to go back," she said quietly, not looking at him. "No," he said just as quietly. "You do not understand. My father will take it out on my sisters. Rose and Pearl, they are not strong like—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "They need me. From what you have told me, he has been hurting all of you for years. Your leaving did not start that, and your going back will not stop it." Jared leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "But maybe there is another way." "What way?" She looked at him then, and he saw the hope and fear warring in her eyes. "We get them out too, your sisters. We help them leave. He will never let them go. He watches them constantly. The only reason I got away is because he thought I was too broken to try." Her voice was bitter. "I proved him right, did I not? I barely made it 5 miles before I collapsed." "You made it 15, Jared corrected. "Doc said the ranch is 15 miles east. You walked 15 miles with cracked ribs and no food or water. That is not weakness, Zara. That is strength." She shook her head. "You do not know what he is like. He has money, power. The marshal is afraid of him. The judge is his friend. Who is going to help 3 women with nothing?" "I am," Jared said. She laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "Why? Why would you risk everything for strangers?" He was quiet for a long moment, trying to find the words. "During the war, I saw a lot of bad things. Did some bad things too, things I'm not proud of. When it was over, I came out here to get away from all that. Built my cabin up in the mountains, thought I could just forget, just exist without having to think about right and wrong anymore." He met her eyes. "But seeing you in that street, seeing what was done to you, I realized I was just being a coward. Hiding from the world does not make it better. Sometimes you have to stand up and do something, even if it is hard, even if it is dangerous." "You could die," she whispered. "My father will kill you if you try to take my sisters." "Maybe," he agreed, "but I've got a better chance than 3 young women on their own, and I know these mountains better than anyone. If we can get your sisters away from the ranch, I can get them somewhere safe, somewhere your father will never find them." "Where?" "I've got friends up in Colorado, a family that runs a trading post near Pikes Peak. Good people who do not ask questions. Your sisters could stay there, start over." He paused. "You could go with them. What about you?" The question came out soft, almost shy. "I will go back to my cabin, back to my life." Something flickered across her face, an emotion he could not quite read. "You would do all that and then just leave?" "I am not the kind of man who lives in towns," he said. "I am better with solitude." She did not say anything for a long time, just looked at him with those honey-colored eyes that seemed to see straight through to all the places he kept locked away. Finally, she nodded. "If you truly mean to help, then I accept. But I want to help get my sisters out. I will not just hide here while you risk your life." "You are still healing." "I am strong enough," she insisted, "and Rose and Pearl will not trust a stranger. They will think it is a trap. They need to see me, need to know I am alive and that there is a way out." He wanted to argue, to tell her she was not ready, that she should stay safe while he handled the dangerous work. But he saw the determination in her face and recognized it as a mirror of his own stubbornness. "All right," he said, "we do it together, but we plan it carefully, and we do not take unnecessary risks." Over the next week, they plotted and schemed. Jared rode out to the Barnett Ranch to scout the layout, careful to stay hidden in the scrub and rocks that dotted the high desert landscape. He watched the rhythms of the ranch, noting when the hands went to the fields, when Zechariah Barnett rode into town, when the sisters were left alone at the house. Zara told him everything she could remember about her father's routines, about the layout of the ranch house, about her sisters' habits. Rose was the oldest, quiet and careful, good at reading their father's moods and steering clear of his rages. Pearl was the youngest, still holding on to some measure of hope that things would get better, that their father would change. Both sisters knew how to ride, could shoot a rifle if needed, and had the same core of strength that kept Zara alive through her long walk to freedom. "They will be scared," Zara said one evening as they sat on the porch of Doc Harrison's office, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of orange and pink. "But they will come. I know they will." Jared looked at her, saw the way the fading light caught in her hair, turning it golden. She had put on a little weight in the 2 weeks since he found her, and her face had lost that skull-like gauntness. She was still too thin, still healing, but there was color in her cheeks now and strength in her movements. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in the delicate, fragile way of the women in town with their fancy dresses and careful manners, but in a fierce, resilient way that took his breath. He looked away quickly, unsettled by the thought. He had not looked at a woman with anything other than passing interest in years, had not let himself want anything beyond the simple needs of survival. Letting someone close meant risking loss, meant opening himself up to the kind of pain he had worked so hard to bury. He could help Zara and her sisters, get them to safety, and then go back to his mountains. That was the plan. That was how it had to be. But when she turned to look at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, he felt something crack in the walls he had built around himself. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I know I have said it before, but I do not think you understand what you have given me. You gave me back my life." "You saved your own life," he said gruffly. "I just helped a little." "You did more than help a little." She reached out tentatively, as if expecting him to pull away, and placed her hand over his where it rested on his knee. Her fingers were small and delicate against his scarred, callous skin. "You are a good man, Jared Pierce. Do not let anyone tell you different." He wanted to argue, to tell her about all the things he had done that proved he was not good at all, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he just sat there, feeling the warmth of her hand on his, and let himself imagine for just a moment that he was the kind of man who deserved that kind of faith. They set their plan in motion on a Tuesday, when Zechariah Barnett was due to ride into Red River for his weekly poker game. Jared and Zara left before dawn, riding double on his big bay gelding with enough supplies for a quick escape. Zara had borrowed a split skirt from the general store owner's wife, who had taken pity on her, and she rode astride behind Jared, her arms wrapped around his waist. He was acutely aware of her body pressed against his back, the way her breath ghosted across his neck, the trust implicit in the way she held onto him. "Focus," he told himself sternly. There was work to do. They approached the Barnett Ranch from the north, using a dry wash to stay out of sight. Jared had timed it perfectly. Zechariah Barnett's big black horse was gone from the corral, and the ranch hands were out in the southern fields, visible as distant figures against the brown landscape. Only the house stood quiet in the morning heat, curtains drawn against the sun. "Stay here," Jared told Zara as he dismounted in a stand of cottonwoods about 100 yards from the house. "I will go first, make sure it is safe." "No," she said, sliding down from the horse with more grace than he expected. "We do this together, remember?" He wanted to argue, but there was no time. They moved quickly toward the house, using the barn as cover. The chickens in their coop clucked softly as they passed, and somewhere a dog barked, once then fell silent. Everything felt too quiet, too still, and Jared's instincts, honed by years in the mountains and the war before that, screamed that something was wrong. They reached the back door of the house, and Zara pushed it open slowly. The kitchen was empty, dishes from breakfast still sitting on the table. She led him through the house, up the narrow stairs to the second floor where the bedrooms were. She stopped outside a closed door and knocked softly. "Rose? Pearl? It is me. It is Zara." For a moment, nothing. Then the door flew open and two women tumbled out, their arms wrapping around Zara in a tangle of embraces and tears, and whispered words that came too fast for Jared to follow. "You are alive," the older sister Rose said. She had the same dark blonde hair as Zara, the same bone structure, though her face was less gaunt. "We thought Father said you died. He said you ran off and got killed by bandits." "He lied," Zara said. "Rose, Pearl, we do not have much time. I came to get you out of here, to take you somewhere safe." Pearl, the youngest, looked past Zara to where Jared stood in the hallway. She had lighter hair than her sisters, more gold than brown, and wide blue eyes that were terrified. "Who is that?" "His name is Jared Pierce. He saved my life, and he's going to help us." Zara turned to look at him, and he saw the absolute trust in her eyes. "You can trust him, I promise." "Father will come after us," Rose said quietly. "You know he will." "Which is why we need to leave now," Jared said, speaking for the first time. "I've got supplies and horses. I can get you to Colorado, to people who will help you start over, but we have to move fast." Rose and Pearl looked at each other, and Jared saw a whole conversation happen in that glance, the kind of communication that only came from years of shared survival. Then Rose nodded. "Give us 5 minutes to pack." 2 minutes, Jared corrected. "Your father could come back any time, and I want to be long gone before he does." They moved quickly, the sisters grabbing small bags and stuffing them with clothes, a few precious items. Jared saw Pearl hesitate over a small wooden box on her dresser, saw the longing in her face before she grabbed it and shoved it in her bag. These women were leaving their whole lives behind, walking away from everything they knew on the word of a stranger, and the trust in their sister. He felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. They made it down the stairs, through the kitchen, and were almost to the barn when the gunshot rang out. Jared reacted on instinct, shoving Zara and her sisters behind him as he drew the revolver he wore at his hip. Zechariah Barnett stood in the doorway of the barn, a rifle leveled at them, his face purple with rage. "I knew you would come back," he snarled. "I knew you were too stupid to stay away, Zara, and you brought this mountain trash with you." "Let them go," Jared said calmly, though his heart was pounding. "This does not have to end badly." "You are right, it does not." Barnett's smile was cold. "My daughters will go back in the house, and you will get off my property before I put a bullet through your skull." "We are not going back," Rose said, and Jared was surprised by the strength in her voice. She stepped out from behind him, her hands clenched at her sides. "You have beaten us, starved us, treated us like slaves our whole lives. No more, Father. We are leaving." "The hell you are." Barnett swung the rifle toward Rose, and that was when everything happened at once. Zara screamed and lunged forward. Jared moved faster than he thought possible, his big body putting itself between the rifle and the women. The gun fired, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Jared felt something punch into his left shoulder, spinning him around, but his own gun was already up and firing. He did not aim to kill, could not bring himself to kill a man in front of his daughters no matter what that man had done. But his bullet took Barnett in the thigh, dropping him to the ground. The rifle clattered from Barnett's hands, and he lay there cursing and clutching his leg while blood seeped between his fingers. Jared kicked the rifle away, then turned to check on the women. They were all staring at him with wide eyes, and he realized blood was running down his arm, dripping off his fingers. "You have been shot," Zara said, her voice shaking. "It is not bad," he lied, though the pain was starting to register now, hot and sharp. "We need to go, now." Rose and Pearl ran for the corral where 2 horses were already saddled, as if their father had been waiting to ride somewhere. Maybe he had set a trap. Maybe he had suspected this exact scenario. It did not matter now. Jared helped Zara onto his bay gelding, then climbed up behind her with a grunt of pain. Blood soaked his shirt, and his left arm was starting to feel heavy and useless. They rode hard, pushing the horses across the scrubland toward the distant mountains. Behind them, Jared could hear Zechariah Barnett's voice, raised in furious shouts, but the words were lost in the thunder of hooves and the rushing wind. Zara clung to him, one hand pressed against the wound in his shoulder, as if she could stop the bleeding through sheer force of will. "Stay with me," she said urgently. "Jared, stay with me." "I am fine," he managed, though the world was starting to tilt and sway in ways that had nothing to do with the horse's movement. He'd been shot before, during the war, knew the stages of blood loss and shock. He had time, he told himself, enough time to get them to safety. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, following the game trails and dry washes that Jared knew like the lines on his own hands. Finally, when he was sure they were far enough ahead, when his vision was starting to gray at the edges, he directed them to a small canyon with a spring at its heart. There was grass for the horses and shelter in an overhang of rock. He half fell from the saddle, and Zara was there to catch him, or try to. She was not strong enough to hold him, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs. Rose and Pearl rushed over, their faces pale with fear. "What do we do?" Pearl asked. "He is bleeding so much." "We have got to stop the bleeding," Rose said, and Jared was dimly impressed by how calm she sounded, how focused. She had clearly dealt with injuries before. "Pearl, get me the supplies from the saddlebags. Zara, help me get his shirt off." He tried to help, tried to stay conscious and aware, but the loss of blood was catching up to him. He felt them cutting away his shirt, felt the pressure of hands against his shoulder, heard voices as if from very far away. "The bullet went through," Rose was saying. "That is good. We just need to pack it and bind it tight." "He saved us," Pearl said, and she was crying. "He barely knows us, and he took a bullet for us." "Hush now," Rose said. "Save the crying for later. We have work to do." Jared felt fabric pressed against the wound, felt the bite of bandages being wound tight around his shoulder and chest. The pain was distant now, floating somewhere outside his body. He forced his eyes open, found Zara's face hovering above his. "Told you. I would get you out," he mumbled. "You idiot," she said, and she was crying too, tears running down her face. "You should have let me go first. You should have stayed safe." "Could not. Let him hurt you." The words were hard to form, his tongue thick and clumsy. "You are too important." He did not mean to say that last part, but it was true, and the blood loss had stripped away his filters. Zara's face blurred and swam, and he let his eyes close, let the darkness take him. When he woke, it was night, and his whole body felt like it was on fire. He was lying on a bedroll under the rock overhang, a small fire crackling nearby. Zara sat beside him, her hand cool on his forehead, and when she saw his eyes open, she made a small sound of relief. "Thank God," she whispered. "You have been burning with fever all day. I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought you were going to die." "Hard to kill," he rasped. His throat was dry as dust. "Water?" She held a canteen to his lips, and he drank greedily, the water like life itself flowing into him. When he had drunk his fill, he looked around the small camp. Rose was tending the fire while Pearl sat with the horses, keeping watch. They had set up a proper camp, had done everything right. These women were survivors, he thought with a surge of admiration. "How long?" he asked. "Since this morning." "It is night now, maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. Zara stroked the hair back from his forehead, and the gesture was so tender it made his chest ache. Your fever broke about an hour ago. Rose says if we can keep the wound clean, if infection does not set in, you should be all right. Rose. She has done this before? Zara's face went hard. My mother had a lot of accidents before she died. Fell down the stairs, walked into doors, you understand. Rose learned how to patch people up. The bitterness in her voice was cutting. Father always made sure we knew how to fix what he broke. Jared reached up with his good arm, caught her hand in his. I am sorry. I am sorry for everything that was done to you, to all of you. It is not your fault. She looked down at their joined hands, her thumb stroking across his knuckles. You know, growing up, I used to dream about someone coming to save us. A knight on a white horse. Like in the fairy tales my mother used to read before she died. Someone strong and brave who would fight for us. She laughed, but it was not a happy sound. But knights do not exist, and no one was coming, and eventually I stopped dreaming about being saved. I just focused on surviving. You did more than survive, Jared said. You fought, you escaped, you saved yourself. And then you came along, she continued as if he had not spoken. This big, scary mountain man with more muscles than good sense. And you did save me. You saved all of us. Why? You never really told me why. He was quiet for a long moment, trying to find the words. The fever and the blood loss had stripped away his usual defenses, leaving him raw and exposed. Because I needed to be saved too, he finally said. Not from a person, but from myself, from the life I was living, hiding away from the world. You gave me a reason to care again, Zara. You made me remember that there are things worth fighting for. She stared at him, her eyes shining in the firelight. You are delirious, she said, but her voice was soft, wondering. Maybe, he agreed, but I mean every word. She bent down then, slowly, giving him time to pull away, and pressed her lips to his forehead in the gentlest of kisses. Sleep now, she whispered. We will talk more when you are well. He wanted to stay awake, wanted to keep looking at her, but his body had other ideas. He felt himself sliding back into sleep, but this time it was peaceful, restful, the kind of sleep that healed. The last thing he was aware of was Zara's hand holding his, an anchor in the dark. The next morning, he woke clear-headed and in significantly less pain. His shoulder throbbed with a deep bone-aching hurt, but the feverish burning was gone. Rose checked his bandages, pronouncing the wound free of infection so far, and they decided to risk staying another day to let him recover a bit more before pushing on. It was a strange day, almost peaceful despite the circumstances. Pearl turned out to be an excellent shot with a rifle, bringing down 2 rabbits that Rose skinned and cooked over the fire. Zara rarely left Jared's side, helping him sit up, bringing him food and water, changing his bandages with careful, gentle hands. You are going to make yourself sick, he told her at one point. You need to rest too. I will rest when we are safe, she said firmly. You took a bullet for me, for us. The least I can do is make sure you do not die from it. I am not going to die, he said, amused by her ferocity. I have survived worse than this. During the war? She settled beside him, her back against the rock wall, her shoulder almost touching his. During and after. He had not talked about those years to anyone, but somehow with Zara it felt easier, like the words had been building up for so long they needed to come out. I was at Gettysburg, saw things no person should see. When it was over, I came west thinking I could outrun the memories, spent a few years drifting, drinking too much, getting into fights. Then I found these mountains, built my cabin, and just stopped. Stopped moving, stopped feeling, stopped living for anything but the next day. That sounds lonely, she said softly. It was, he admitted, but it felt safer than the alternative, than letting myself care about things that could be taken away. And now? He turned his head to look at her and found her watching him with an intensity that made his breath catch. Now I'm not sure safety is what I want anymore. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the play of sunlight on the canyon walls, listening to the trickle of the spring and the soft voices of her sisters as they talked by the fire. It occurred to Jared that this was the most at peace he had felt in years, even wounded and on the run, and the irony was not lost on him. Can I ask you something? Zara said eventually. Anything. When you take us to Colorado to your friends, what will you do then? Will you come with us or go back to your cabin? It was the question he had been avoiding thinking about. The plan had always been to see them safe and then return to his solitary life. But something had changed in him over these past weeks, something fundamental that he could not quite name. The thought of going back to that empty cabin, of never seeing Zara again, felt wrong in a way he could not explain. "I do not know," he said honestly. "What would you want me to do?" She looked away, color rising in her cheeks. "That is not fair. You cannot put this on me." "Why not?" "Because it is your life, your choice. I have no right to ask you to give up your home, your way of living." "Zara," he waited until she looked at him. "If you want me to stay, if there is a reason for me to stay, tell me." She bit her lip, and he saw her wrestling with something internal. Finally, she said, "I do not want you to leave because you feel obligated. I do not want to be another burden you carry." "You are not a burden," he said firmly. "You have never been a burden." "Then what am I?" The question came out almost angry. "You risked your life for me, took a bullet for me and my sisters. You're going to upend everything to get us to safety. What am I to you, Jared?" He could have deflected, could have given her some safe, non-committal answer, but the honesty between them felt too important to break now. "You are the reason I want to stay," he said simply. "You are what I would stay for if you wanted me to." Her eyes went wide, and he saw her throat move as she swallowed. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are strong and brave and fierce. I know you walked 15 miles with broken ribs to save yourself. I know you risked everything to save your sisters. I know that every time you smile, it feels like the sun coming out." He paused. "And I know that I have not felt this alive, this awake, in 10 years. Jared." She looked overwhelmed, uncertain. "You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. Whatever you decide, wherever you want to go, I will help you. No strings, no expectations." She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it. After a moment, she reached out and took his hand again, threading her fingers through his. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for your honesty, for everything." They sat like that, hands joined, until Rose called them for the midday meal. Jared let Zara help him to his feet, let her steady him when he swayed, and tried not to think about how right it felt to have her close, to lean on her strength as she had leaned on his. They left the canyon the next morning, Jared insisting he was well enough to ride despite Rose's protests. They had a long journey ahead of them, up through the mountains to Colorado, and every day they delayed was another day Zechariah Barnett could be organizing a pursuit. Jared did not think the man would give up easily, not when his pride and his property were at stake. They needed to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the Barnett Ranch. The journey was hard but beautiful, taking them up through pine forests and over high mountain passes where the air was thin and cold even in August. Jared knew these mountains like old friends, knew every pass and valley, every source of water and shelter. He led them on paths that would be hard to follow, doubling back sometimes, using streams to hide their tracks. Pearl sang as they rode, soft songs that Jared half remembered from his childhood, and Rose proved to have a dry sense of humor that surprised them all. They were good women, strong and resilient, and he understood why Zara had been willing to risk death to escape and find help for them. They deserved better than the life they had been living. At night, they camped in hidden valleys and beneath overhangs of rock. Jared taught them things he had learned over his years in the mountains, how to read the weather, how to find food and water, how to move quietly through the forest. They were quick learners, all three of them, soaking up the knowledge like dry earth soaking up rain. Zara stayed close to him always, helping with his bandages, making sure he ate and rested. His shoulder was healing well, the wound closing cleanly, though it would leave a scar. He caught her looking at him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, something between wonder and uncertainty and fear. On the 5th night of their journey, when they were camped in a high meadow with a view of the stars that stretched from horizon to horizon, Rose and Pearl announced they were going to wash in a nearby stream. It was a transparent excuse to leave Jared and Zara alone, and from the knowing looks on their faces, they were not trying to hide it. "Your sisters are not subtle," Jared observed as he sat by the fire, poking at the embers with a stick. Zara laughed, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. They have decided you are their hero and that I should marry you immediately. He froze, the stick falling from his hand. Have they now? She sobered, looking at him across the fire. I told them it is more complicated than that you have your own life, that you do not owe us anything more than you have already given. What if I want to give more? The words came out before he could stop them, raw and honest. Why? She stood, moving around the fire to sit beside him. I need to understand why, Jared. Men do not just change their whole lives for women they barely know. There has to be something else, some reason. You want a reason? He turned to face her fully, his good hand reaching up to cup her face. How about this? You're the first person in 10 years who made me want to be more than I am. You are brave and beautiful and— Do not say that, she interrupted, her voice sharp. She pulled away from his touch, and he saw tears starting in her eyes. Say what? That I am beautiful. I am not beautiful. I am broken and scarred and ugly, and you do not have to lie to make me feel better. The words came out in a rush, years of pain and self-loathing behind them. My father told me every day of my life how worthless I was, how no man would ever want me, how I should be grateful he did not just throw me out into the street because I was too ugly to look at. And maybe he was right. Maybe. Stop. Jared's voice was hard, commanding, and she fell silent. Your father was wrong about everything. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. You do not mean that. I do. He reached for her again, and this time she did not pull away. You are beautiful, Zara. Not despite your scars, but including them. Every mark on your body is proof that you survived, that you fought, that you refused to be broken. That is beautiful. Your strength is beautiful. Your courage is beautiful. You are beautiful. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. No one has ever said that to me before. Then everyone else was blind. He pulled her into his arms, careful of his injured shoulder, and held her while she cried. She clung to him, her face buried against his chest, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. He stroked her hair, murmuring wordless sounds of comfort, and felt his own eyes sting. How could anyone look at this woman, this fierce survivor with her honey-colored eyes and her unbreakable spirit, and see anything but beauty? How could her father have been so cruel, so blind to what he had in his daughters? The waste of it, the tragedy of it, made Jared angry in a way he had not been angry in years. You are beautiful, he said again, and kept saying it over and over until her tears slowed and her breathing evened. Do you hear me, Zara? You are beautiful. You are worthy. You deserve every good thing this world has to offer. I want to believe you, she whispered against his chest. I want to so badly. Then believe me. He tilted her face up, used his thumb to wipe away her tears. I will say it every day if I have to. I will say it until you believe it, until you see yourself the way I see you. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. You really mean it. You really think I am beautiful. I know you are, he said firmly, and then she was kissing him, her lips soft and desperate against his. Jared froze for half a heartbeat, surprised, and then he was kissing her back, his hand sliding into her hair, his good arm pulling her closer. She tasted like salt from her tears and smoke from the fire and something indefinably her, and he wanted to drown in it, to lose himself completely in this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. I do not know what I am doing, she admitted. I have never kissed anyone before. You are doing fine, he said, his voice rough. Better than fine. I want to believe all the things you said, about me being beautiful, being worthy. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Will you help me believe it? Will you stay and help me learn how to see myself the way you see me? Yes, he said without hesitation. For as long as you want me, I will stay. What about your cabin? Your life in the mountains? You are my life now, he said simply. If you will have me. She kissed him again in answer, and this time it was slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility. When Rose and Pearl returned from their strategically timed walk, they found Jared and Zara sitting by the fire, her head on his good shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling. About About time, Rose said with satisfaction. Pearl just grinned. I knew it. I told you, Rose. I said they were going to fall in love. Zara blushed but did not deny it, and Jared found he did not want to deny it either. It was too soon, too fast, but it was also undeniably real. He had fallen in love with this strong, scarred woman, and somehow, miraculously, she felt the same. They reached Colorado territory a week later, the journey having been blessedly free of pursuit. Jared had not let his guard down, had kept watch every night for signs of Zechariah Barnett or hired men on their trail, but it seemed they had gotten away clean. Either Barnett's leg wound had been worse than Jared thought, or the man had decided 3 daughters were not worth chasing all the way to Colorado. Either way, they were safe. The trading post sat in a high valley near the base of Pikes Peak, a rough collection of log buildings run by a man named Samuel Wright and his wife, Esther. Jared had met them years ago when he was drifting, had helped Samuel fight off a group of bandits who tried to rob the post. They had stayed friends ever since, in the loose way of mountain folk who might not see each other for years but remained connected. Samuel took one look at the 4 of them riding into his yard, dusty and tired, and obviously on the run from something, and just nodded. Got room in the bunkhouse, he said, and Esther will get you fed. We can talk about the rest later. That night, around the Wrights' big kitchen table with full bellies and warm beds ahead of them, Jared explained the situation. He did not go into details about the abuse, just said that the Barnett sisters needed a fresh start and a safe place to land. Samuel and Esther exchanged a look, and Esther reached across the table to take Rose's hand. You are welcome here, she said firmly. All of you, for as long as you need. We can always use help running the post, and there's a small cabin out back that is not being used. It is not fancy, but it is clean and private. We can work, Rose said quickly. We will earn our keep. We do not expect charity. It is not charity, it is decent Christian kindness, Esther said, though I will not turn down help if you are offering it. Running a trading post is a lot of work. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Rose proved to have a gift for numbers and took over the bookkeeping for the post. Pearl loved the trading aspect, chatting with the miners and trappers who came through, negotiating deals that left everyone happy. Zara helped Esther with the cooking and the garden, learning things her father had never allowed her time to learn. And Jared found himself in the strange position of being part of a community again. Samuel offered him work as a guide and hunter, taking rich Eastern folks up into the mountains to shoot elk and bear. It was good money and let Jared use skills he already had, and more importantly, it meant he could stay near Zara. They courted in a slow, careful way, learning each other by degrees. Jared told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, about his parents who had died of influenza when he was 16, about his younger brother who had been killed at Antietam. Zara told him about her mother, a gentlewoman who had tried to protect her daughters and paid for it with her life. She told him about the small moments of happiness she and her sisters had stolen over the years, the way they had created a family within the prison of their father's house. He took her riding up into the mountains, showing her the high meadows where wildflowers bloomed in riots of color. She taught him how to bake bread, how to make a house feel like a home. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, and slowly, gradually, Zara started to believe the things he told her about her worth, her beauty, her strength. 3 months after they arrived in Colorado, Jared took Zara up to a particular spot he loved, a cliff overlooking a valley where you could see for miles. They sat on the sun-warmed rock, her head on his shoulder, and watched hawks circle in the endless blue sky. I have something to ask you, he said, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the thin mountain air. She sat up, looking at him with those honey-colored eyes that still took his breath away. What is it? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was not fancy, just a simple gold band he had bought from a prospector passing through the trading post, but he had cleaned it until it shone. Marry me, Zara. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you how beautiful you are, how loved you are, how much you mean to me. Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling, that brilliant smile that lit up her whole face. Yes, she said. Yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, long and deep and full of all the things he felt but could not put into words. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, she said, "I believe you now, you know." "Believe what?" "That I'm beautiful, that I'm worthy." She touched his face, her fingers gentle on his bearded jaw. "You made me believe it. You loved me until I could love myself." "You were always worthy," he said. "You were always beautiful. I just helped you see it." They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the trading post, with Samuel and Esther standing witness, and Rose and Pearl crying happy tears. Zara wore a simple dress in blue calico that matched her eyes, and Jared wore his best shirt, his hair tied back and his beard trimmed. They spoke their vows in front of a makeshift altar, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. And when he kissed his wife for the first time as a married man, Jared felt something settle in his chest, something that had been restless and seeking for years, finally finding its home. They moved into a cabin they built together on a piece of land Samuel helped them claim, high enough to have a view but low enough to be practical. It was hard work, building a life from scratch, but they did it together. Jared taught Zara how to hunt and fish, how to read the weather and the land. She taught him how to be part of a family again, how to let people close, how to trust in happiness. Rose met a widower who ran a lumber mill, a kind man with 2 young sons who needed a mother. She married him a year after they arrived in Colorado, and Jared had never seen her look so happy as she did on her wedding day. Pearl eventually married a young doctor who set up practice in the growing town near the trading post. The sisters stayed close, visiting each other often, their bond unbroken by distance or time. Jared and Zara had their first child 18 months after they married, a son they named Jacob. He was a healthy baby with his mother's honey-colored eyes and his father's dark hair, and Jared cried the first time he held him, overwhelmed by the fragile perfection of this tiny life they had created. Zara was an amazing mother, pouring all the love she had been denied into her son, and watching her with Jacob made Jared fall in love with her all over again. 2 years later, they had twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel and Sarah. The cabin rang with laughter and chaos, with the sounds of children playing and crying and learning. Jared built additions to the house as their family grew, adding rooms and a bigger kitchen, a porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset over the mountains. He kept his promise to Zara, telling her every single day that she was beautiful, that she was loved, that she was worthy of every happiness. And slowly, over the years, he watched her transform. The shadows left her eyes, replaced by a confidence and joy that made her glow. She laughed easily, loved fiercely, and raised their children to know their worth and their strength. They never heard from Zechariah Barnett again. Jared made a few discreet inquiries over the years and learned that the man had died of an infection from the gunshot wound about 2 years after they left New Mexico. Jared did not mourn him, but he did feel a certain satisfaction in knowing that Zara and her sisters had outlasted their abuser, had built good lives in spite of everything he had tried to break in them. Years passed, measured in seasons and harvests, in children growing and life unfolding in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Jared's hair went gray, and his body accumulated the aches and pains of a life lived hard, but he never regretted a single moment. This life, with Zara, with their children and their home in the mountains, was everything he had never known he wanted. On their 20th anniversary, he took Zara back to the cliff where he had proposed. They had left the children with Rose for the day, and they rode up the mountain trail side by side, older and slower than they had been, but no less in love. They sat on the same sun-warmed rock and looked out over the valley that had become home. "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked. "Giving up your solitary life, taking on a wife and children and all the complications that come with them?" Jared looked at her, at the woman she had become over 2 decades of love and healing. There was silver in her hair now, lines around her eyes, but she was more beautiful to him than she had been at 22. She was confident and strong, a pillar of their community, a mother their children adored, a wife who made every day worth living. "Not for 1 second," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara. You and our family, this life we built together. I would not change a single thing." "Not even the part where you got shot?" she teased, tracing the scar on his shoulder through his shirt. "Not even that," he confirmed. "It was worth it, all of it, to get to this, to get to you." She kissed him then, sweet and familiar, and full of the love they had built over 20 years of marriage. I love you, Jared Pierce. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself. Thank you for loving me until I learned how to believe in that love. Thank you for letting me, he said, for giving me a reason to come down from my mountain and rejoin the world. You saved me just as much as I saved you. We saved each other, she corrected, and he could not argue with that. They stayed on that cliff until the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Then they rode back down to the valley, to their home and their children, to the life they had fought for and built together. It was not a fairy tale life, not perfect or without struggles, but it was real and it was theirs, and it was more than enough. Jared had spent 10 years hiding from life, convinced that solitude was safety and that caring for others only led to pain. Then Zara had stumbled into his life, broken and bruised but undefeated, and she had shown him that love was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. She had given him back his life, and he had spent every day since trying to show her the beauty and worth she had always possessed but never been allowed to see. They had started as strangers, a mountain man and a woman running from hell, but they had become something more. They had become partners, lovers, friends, parents. They had become each other's home, each other's safe harbor in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. And every day, through word and deed, they reminded each other that they were loved, they were valued, and they were beautiful. As they reached their cabin, the windows glowing with lamplight and the sounds of their children's voices drifting out into the evening air, Jared looked at Zara and saw his whole world in her smile. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his the way she had done that first night by the fire so many years ago, and led him home. Inside, their children rushed to greet them, Jacob tall and strong at 19, already talking about claiming his own land. The twins, 17 now, and growing into their own people, full of dreams and plans for the future. Jared pulled Zara close, his arm around her waist, and looked at the family they had built, the love they had nurtured, the home they had created from nothing but determination and hope. This was his legacy, he thought. Not the war he had fought in, or the years he had spent alone in the mountains, but this love, this family, this life built on the foundation of two broken people who had found healing in each other. Zara had been told her whole life that she was worthless, that she was ugly, that she would never be loved. And he had been lost, drowning in guilt and isolation, convinced he did not deserve happiness. But they had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found themselves. Jared had been the first person to call Zara beautiful, the first person to see her worth and reflect it back to her until she could see it herself. She had cried, and he had held her, and together they had built a life that proved every cruel word her father ever spoke was a lie. The years continued to pass, steady and sure as the turning of seasons. They watched their children grow and marry and have children of their own. Jared and Zara became grandparents, and then great-grandparents, their cabin always full of laughter and life. They worked hard and loved harder, and through it all, through every joy and every sorrow, they had each other. On Jared's 75th birthday, surrounded by 3 generations of family, Zara gave him a gift. It was a photograph, new technology that had finally made its way to their corner of Colorado. The photograph showed the two of them standing in front of their cabin, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling into the camera. They were old now, faces lined with decades of living, but the love between them was as visible as if it were written in the air around them. "So we never forget," Zara said, pressing the photograph into his hands. "So our grandchildren know that love is real, that it is possible to survive the worst things and still build something beautiful." Jared looked at the photograph, at the evidence of their life together, and felt his eyes sting with tears. "How did I get so lucky?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Luck had nothing to do with it," she said firmly. "You chose to help a broken woman in the street. You chose to risk everything to save her and her sisters. You chose love over fear, over safety, over the easy path. That was not luck, my love. That was courage." "You were the brave one," he argued, walking 15 miles with broken ribs, trusting a stranger, building a new life from nothing. Then we were both brave, she said, and kissed him gently. And we both chose well. That night, lying in bed with his wife of 5 decades curled against his side, Jared thought about the path his life had taken. If someone had told that solitary mountain man who came to town for supplies in 1876 that he would end up here with a wife and children and grandchildren and a life full of love, he would not have believed them. He had been so sure that solitude was his fate that he was meant to live alone in the mountains until he died. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Fate had put a young woman in his path, a woman who needed saving and who, in turn, saved him right back. Fate had given them both a second chance at life, at love, at happiness. And they had grabbed that chance with both hands and built something extraordinary from it. Jared died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, surrounded by family, his hand clasped in Zara's. His last words were to her, the same words he had spoken every day of their married life. "You are beautiful." Zara lived 5 more years, staying in the cabin they had built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her fiercely. She spent her days telling stories of her life with Jared, making sure the younger generations understood what they had overcome, what they had built. She wanted them to know that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that courage could come from the most unexpected places, that beauty was not about physical perfection, but about strength and resilience and the refusal to be broken. On the morning she died, in her 86th year, she was found sitting in her rocking chair on the porch, a photograph clutched in her hands. It was the one taken on Jared's 75th birthday, showing the two of them standing together, proof of a love that had endured through decades and trials and the simple everyday challenges of building a life. They buried her next to Jared on a hillside overlooking the valley, the mountains rising all around them like silent sentinels. Their grave markers were simple, just their names and dates, but their family added a quote underneath, words that summed up their love story. She was beautiful, and he made her believe it. Together, they built a life from love. The story of Jared and Zara became legend in their family, passed down through generations as proof that love could conquer even the cruelest circumstances. Their descendants scattered across the West, but they always remembered where they came from, always remembered the mountain man and the woman he saved, and how that one act of courage and compassion had rippled out to create dozens of lives, hundreds of lives, each one touched by the love that started on a dusty street in Red River, New Mexico in 1876. In the end, it was a simple story. A man saw a woman who needed help and chose to help her. He told her she was beautiful when no one else had, and he kept telling her until she believed it. And in that believing, in that love, they found healing and hope, and a happiness that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was not a fairy tale, not a story of knights and princesses, but something better because it was real. It was proof that even in the harsh world of the Wild West, even in the face of cruelty and violence, love could bloom and flourish and create something lasting and true. And in the quiet moments, when the wind blows through the pine trees on that hillside in Colorado, some say you can still feel it, that love that refused to die with its bearers. It lives on in the land they claimed, in the cabin that still stands after more than a century, in the descendants who carry their blood and their names. It lives on in the story of a mountain man who was the first to ever call her beautiful, who held her while she cried, who stayed by her side until she learned to believe in her own worth. That is the kind of love that changes the world, one heart at a time. That is the kind of love that lasts forever.